Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new Gentech PC product showcase. In today's full-length featured review, we'll be taking a detailed look at the brand new Asus Republic of Gamers Strix Scar 18. As suggested by the name, this is a large 18-inch laptop, and the Strix Scar series has always been tailored towards gamers, so we have features such as the RGB that are common in those arenas, but the gaming laptop environment always makes great desktop replacements or productivity workstations as well. So in our detailed review, we'll cover everything about this laptop, and we'll go ahead and get things started with our unboxing. So we can see our interior box is a somewhat non-flashy flat gray color, and as we get it open, our laptop is presented on the top, covered in a plastic material. Just underneath of the laptop, we have our power supply on the left, and the actual power brick is also covered in the plastic material. So these coatings help protect it from getting scratched during shipping. And over on the right side compartment at the top, this is where we have our user replaceable hinge covers. So you can switch those out to kind of change up the look of the laptop. And in the final compartment, once it's opened, it's going to reveal your basic printed paper, warranty information, product information. Of course, nowadays, if you want to get your newest drivers and everything, you just go online and download them from the website. So now that we have everything removed from the box, let's go ahead and get to the laptop itself and get that protective plastic removed. This gives us a chance to see the bottom of the laptop. We see some color variations in the paneling for decorative purposes, and we see all of the ventilation slots cut into the bottom of the panel to allow all the air into the system. As we get further along into the review, you'll find that this has a 3-fan cooling system, so there is a lot of air moving through the system. And as we go ahead and flip over the laptop, we'll get a first glance at the top panel. We do have the Asus Republic of Gamers logo on there, a little bit of etching through the center, the advertisement with some of the laptop features, and a satin matte black finish. So here we are powering on the laptop for the first time, and let's go take a closer look. One of the neat features about this laptop is the translucent casing, so you can actually see some of the laptop internals right through the top. We have a large, full-size, chiclet-style keyboard with RGB backlit keys. We have the Core i9 and RTX 4090 equipped in this laptop, and we'll get into those hardware features later. Integrated HD webcam and microphone on the very large 18-inch screen, which basically has no bezels, so it's almost all screen for this laptop. For anyone who wishes to use the laptop without an external mouse, you have a very large touchpad with the integrated left and right clicks in the center. And let's go take a look at our connectivity and interfaces. From left to right, we have our charging port, the RJ45 2.5 gigabit LAN, HDMI 2.1, 2 USB-C ports, and our combo 3.5mm headphone and microphone jack. To the rear of the laptop, there's no connectivity or interfaces, but we do see the RGB across the back exhaust area. And on the right-hand side, we have 2 USB Type-A ports and another air intake area. So here's a quick last look at the system with the lid in the closed position, and then we'll move into the next part of our review where we look at all the included system hardware. Let's start the hardware deep dive by looking at Device Manager. We'll see we have the nVidia RTX 4090, the 16GB version, the Core i9-13980HX for the CPU. Here's our monitor panel ID. The information on this, we have a 2560 by 1600 resolution, 240 Hertz. A quick look at the included Asus software. This is where you can monitor the system's current settings and change things such as the current running mode. Detailed information on the current monitoring of the temperatures. We can see the CPU temperature between 70 and 90 degrees Celsius, depending on the core. And the other major temperature we want to look at is going to be the dedicated nVidia GPU. And it's currently running about 70 degrees Celsius on the memory and hotspot, and only 57 degrees Celsius on the GPU core. Feel free to pause at any moment if you want to take a closer look at the dedicated specs for the GPU and CPU. And while we recorded the internal temperatures for our benchmark purposes, we also need to get our outside temperatures. So here's a quick look at the outside temps using our infrared camera. We'll see that the keyboard area definitely has a little bit of extra heat that's towards some of the components like the CPU and the GPU, and the palm area where your hands actually rest remains nice and cool. As we move over to the side, this is where some of the intake and exhaust vents are located on the laptop. So we see a little bit more heat concentrated in those areas. A fairly even distribution of heat across the entire exhaust on the rear. And for our last baseline reading before we start some of our benchmarks, let's look at our current noise levels while the system is still idle. Let's go ahead and move now into our benchmarking section, and we'll start things off with Firestrike. As the benchmark's running, we'll go back and check our noise levels from the fans again. We'll see how much they've gone up. One thing to keep in mind is these are worst case scenarios with a microphone right next to the exhaust, but you can take these readings from one of our reviews and compare different laptops to each other since the readings are done the same. So our first benchmark has completed, and Firestrike came in with a score of 34,550. And let's go check on how our temperatures did during that test. So we see the CPU, actually the temperatures look more or less the same as they did before the test. Some of the lower cores that were in the 70s have gone up to the 80s, but nothing went up higher than it did before as far as the 90s. Down below, when we get to the GPU information, we'll see that the hotspot only went up a little bit. The core temperature went up as much as 73 degrees, which is still very cool as far as hardware goes on video card temperatures. We're also going to run Firestrike Extreme, and we got 22,725 points on that benchmark. Time Spy, 18,772. On Time Spy Extreme, we got a score of 9,720 points. And for Port Royale, we got 12,597 points. Moving into a different kind of benchmark, we've got Cinebench R23, and we'll go ahead and do a real-time run of that one. A multi-score of 25,789 with a single score of 2,138 puts us pretty high up on the charts. And we're also going to go ahead and run a few of the Blender benchmarks. The very first run will be with the CPU only. And the scores for the CPU only was 187 for Monster, 119 for Junk Shop, and 87 for Classroom. And now running those benchmarks a second time with the dedicated GPU enabled. And we were able to get 3,765 on Monster, 1,840 on Junk Shop, and 1,834 on Classroom. Next up is a quick demonstration of the sound system.
Engage your air missiles!
And now we're on to our final portion of our review, which is going to be the detailed disassembly of the system. So we'll take a close look at the bottom here where all the screws need to be removed. As you can see, there's several screws to remove and they are not all of the same length. So be sure to keep the right screws in the right places if you disassemble the system. Otherwise, you could cause damage when you put it back together. Now let's go take a first look at the inside of the system. One of the most notable features of this laptop is it has a 3-fan cooling system, and that's why you saw those slots cut open in the bottom for those 3 fans. We do have a generous sized battery of 90 watt hours, and we have built-in speakers to the left and right sides of it. We have protective covers over the system RAM. And we have one SSD on the right hand side and another SSD on the left hand side. For the next steps in disassembly, we removed all of the system components and we went ahead and took the cooling solution apart. We see our system RAM, the cooling fans, the SSDs, and all of the screws that were required to take the cooling solution apart. Asus has chosen to use the liquid metal compound for cooling, but they did not use thermal pads for the other parts. They did use a thermal paste for those. So here's a close-up of our CPU and GPU with the remains of the thermal paste all over the system from removing the cooling solution. And what the bare motherboard looks like with everything removed. So with our system disassembly complete, that does finalize our review today for the new Asus Republic of Gamers Strix 18. We hope that you were able to enjoy today's review and find it both entertaining and educational. If this was a system that you're interested in or you'd like to learn a little bit more, check out the video description section and find the link to the product page where you can find the full system specs and the current pricing and availability. Throughout the review, if you had any questions that remained unanswered, feel free to ask those questions down below in the comment section so we can answer those for you and everybody else. And don't forget, if you have any personalized questions that you need to ask us one-on-one, you can always reach out to us by phone or email and we'll be happy to help you. So once again, we just want to remind everybody that this was Gentech PC and we'll see you next time.